Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service and jbiztechvalley.com.
Well, Rabbi, I always like to bring musical guests on as often as we can, and we have a wonderful band, parts of a band that, plays. I heard them in Glens Falls, I've heard them in Albany, the Kleine Klezmer, and they want to play klezmer music for us today. So welcome David Ray and David Bates. And the two Davids. So
thank you for having us.
It's so wonderful to have you here. I'm so happy that you're able to entertain us, as you might say.
Before you entertain,
we'll do our best.
We want to talk about where klezmer music came from. Just a short. I don't want to stop the music performance, and I'd rather hear the music, but just to give our audience a little bit of the history of where klezmer music came from.
Well, the origins really were in itinerant musicians in Eastern Europe who, by and large, were actually musically illiterate and were played in the early 19th century and probably even earlier than that. Initially, most of their music was for mitzvahs, like for particularly weddings, and so there's a lot of klezmer music that is wedding oriented. And as they wandered around Eastern Europe, they became popular with people in the countries in which they were dwelling. And particularly there's the apocryphal story, I don't know if it's apocryphal, that klezmer musicians were particularly popular with Polish nobility playing for their weddings because they really liked having the Jewish musicians because they didn't drink, they were willing to play all day, and they brought their own food. So that was sort of how
it has European tunes to it. I mean, that's your influence from the surrounding areas. So
you can kind of think of klezmer a little bit like Yiddish, in terms of that it's a combination of influences. There's Russian influences, there's Gypsy influences, Southern European influences. There's a lot of similarities between klezmer music and Greek music, and it probably, in many cases, may go back to originally Turks.
Very interesting.
And according to Wikipedia, klezmer is a combination of the Hebrew words kli, meaning tool or utensil. You can correct me if this is wrong. And zemer, meaning to make music, leading to zemer kli, and it's vessel of song, meaning musical instrument.
Excellent.
And that's how the folks at Wikipedia trace
Should we
it back.
hear a little music
But it's,
here?
the Ashkenazi Jews of Eastern Europe is a tradition, musical tradition for them. So what would you like to play for your
Now,
first?
you won't mind if Mark and I get up and dance over here. We're really going to.
If there's room, we strongly encourage it. Makes it better for us
right.
too. Well, we've picked out a few tunes that sort of span the history or the recent history of klezmer music, starting with one of the first tunes that was actually written down because, as I said, a lot of the klezmer musicians were actually musically illiterate, and so it was an oral tradition, as it were, or
the oral Torah,
an auditory tradition. And so the first tune we're going to play is something called, it originally was known as Rev Dovidel.
Right.
And also
it
known
was
as Yashki.
apparently in its time it was considered by the Polish nobility to be the klezmer tune par excellence. So it was kind of like, as you might think of Hava Nagila today, in the
18th, 19th century.
In the 18th, 19th century, this was the tune that the
number one hit parade.
Right.
Okay. So let's. Beautiful, beautiful. Wow.
Beautiful. Love that music.
So how many members are in the Kleine Klezmer? How many band members do you have? Because
Well, it varies, but usually our essential core is a clarinet player, because everybody associates clarinet music with klezmer music, although actually the violin was originally the lead instrument. I have to put in a plug. And we have a singer who sings in Yiddish, and a bass player. We've in the past had tuba players, but most recently we've been playing with a person playing acoustic bass, and occasionally a drummer.
So you have, what, 6 members?
And
But-
we also do occasionally have a trumpet player.
And when I saw you at the Hudson Synagogue, you know, what is it? The Hudson Synagogue, for their 125th anniversary you played, you know, you had a larger band, more members than I saw you earlier in the day when you were playing also. I saw you twice in one day. This is great. But what was, why did you have fewer members at this?
Well, it's whatever the customer wants.
Okay, okay.
That's a typical klezmer thing.
Did you do freestanding concerts, or it's always a bar mitzvah or a synagogue?
We've played at some venues. Some years ago, we played at Cafe Lena. I'm trying to think of
In
other-
Saratoga, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we also did share the stage at Page Hall a number of years ago with a touring klezmer band. I don't recall what the band was.
But you were also up in Glens Falls at the
Right.
Hanukkah party.
Right. We play, I'd say
And-
probably the majority of the jobs we do are either simchas
Right.
or where we're invited in at one shul, another for
And
a
then
shul event.
Anshe Emeth is the Hudson Synagogue. I just
Right.
remember.
And
that.
we frankly have been very popular at nursing homes, because
Really?
there's a lot of older people, you know, who came from Eastern Europe, and we bring, it's fun, it's really wonderful to play for them, because, you know, not that it's wonderful to bring tears to their eyes, but it really does. You know,
Well, I will
these are
see
people
you
who we
when
see,
I'm in the
we see-
nursing home.
we
I will
see-
see you. and
We
you
see
can
them
play.
mouthing the words as we're playing.
Right. Right.
Well, I have seen that happen at some of the nursing homes. So do you send out like cards that say I'm available for your nursing home, or do you just?
They just find us.
They just find you, and you're.
I mean,
like,
we've been around long enough that they know how to find us.
When did you first come together as a band?
Approximately.
Probably about 29 years ago.
That's about
I would
right,
guess.
yeah.
My son is 30, and I think he was 1.
Uh-huh. So you've been you're really in sync with each other. You know,
Yeah, we've been.
Well, we've been doing this a long time.
now you're with Ohav Shalom
Right.
in Albany, and you're with B'nai Shalom
Right.
in Albany, the Reform Synagogue and the Conservative Synagogue.
Right.
So
We put aside our differences.
You
to
put
play.
aside those differences there, okay? And he's with the Orthodox Synagogue, so we got them all here.
Yeah,
You
no, we're
know?
going to have a convention.
So what? Now that's not a Stradivarius violin. So
No, actually, I inherited this from my father when he died a few years ago. It was his violin that he grew up playing, and it's a Schweitzer. Well, it might be a Schweitzer. It's probably, it says Schweitzer inside. It's actually probably a late 19th century German student violin, but they actually made violins by hand in those days.
is Jack Benny your idol, or
Maybe his jokes.
his
you
joke?
know.
But what about the instrument? Who did you, you know, who's your idol in terms of the violin playing?
Whoa.
Okay, there you go. Just put it on your, clip it on the middle of your shirt there. That's fine. Okay.
It would be hard to say. I mean, in terms of klezmer music, I really love Alicia Sviegals, you know, who has played with the Klezmatics. But you know, I've played a lot of jazz, and so I love a lot of jazz violinists too, like Stefan Grappelli, and all that comes to play really when you're doing klezmer music, because it really is improvisational. It's a jazzy kind of music.
How did you get into playing the accordion?
Well, I grew up playing piano, and I got interested in more traditional music. I started going to the Old Songs festivals when I was in my mid-20s, and I got very interested in traditional music. And with my background playing piano, accordion was like a natural fit. And after I'd been playing traditional music, a lot of French Canadian, a lot of Irish music, for a few years I got increasingly interested in Jewish music. And that's how I got involved with klezmer music.
Wow. That's
There's
great.
actually an interesting story, which is Henry Sapoznik, who wrote one of the sort of Bibles of klezmer history, was I guess a student as a musicologist, and he was studying music. He was listening to traditional music in, I believe, like South Carolina, listening to traditional old-time music, and when he was listening to one of the musicians turned to him and said, "Don't your people have any music?" And it was like a light went on in his head, and he thought, "Yeah, we do have music. Why am I studying other people's music?"
So,
interesting.
what's your next piece that you wanted to perform?
Do you want to do Mama ist gegangen?
Sure.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, that's great. Wow, that's so impressive that you could just do this so off the cuff, like this. This is great.
29 years, I'm sure it's not such off the cuff there.
We played him
A
a few
lot of,
times.
yeah.
And of course, I mean, this is a song that has lyrics. A lot of these songs have Yiddish lyrics that are just really
You do
charming.
any singing yourselves? or
We
do-
don't. We are modest about our singing ability. So modest that we don't sing. We have a woman who has been singing with us for a number of years, and she has schooled herself in Yiddish and really does a wonderful job with
Yes,
it.
she does.
And I'll tell you, there are a lot of films that have included Yiddish music. And I actually heard the soundtrack of Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish.
Really?
For the first time, yeah. I got it on a
Wow.
DVD. It was really, a CD rather. It was really great. You can
Is
pick up some
Fiddler
of
on
the
the
words.
Roof, would you call klezmer? I mean, it was Hollywood production, so it's not your authentic, but maybe
Well,
they picked up close
It's-
enough.
It's actually interesting. There was an essay on it written by, I believe his name is Mark Slobin, who's a major ethnomusicologist, and he talked about the evolution of Jewish music in Broadway and the Yiddish theater from the early 1900s through Fiddler on the Roof. And one of the points he makes is by Fiddler on the Roof, it's not in the melodies, it's in the accompaniment where you start hearing the klezmer music. By contrast, one of the tunes we do is a tune called Paparosin, which was written for the Yiddish theater, written in Yiddish, and there it's not just the vocal, the whole thing has much stronger Yiddish influence.
Mm.
And we could play that tune for you.
Well,
Sure.
Okay.
close is Hebrew to the klezmer, the Yiddish of the klezmer music? I mean, does it one derive from the other?
Well, Hebrew music, or I mean, the Yiddish that's generally used in klezmer music recordings apparently is from Ukraine. The more, and as you know, Yiddish, you've got Lithuanian Yiddish, and then you've got Galicianer Yiddish, and apparently it's a thick Galicianer Yiddish that's usually used by most of the singers. In fact, Molly Picon, when as she got more involved, she didn't hear all that much Yiddish growing up, and went to Europe to learn how to speak Yiddish properly.
Really? Wow.
But you know, so it's as close to Hebrew as any Yiddish is to Hebrew.
But there is Hebrew music in the synagogue temple service. And I know modern days they take these kind of verses from the prayer book and they make them a little more hip and, you know, with the electrical guitars. But klezmer does that also.
Well, the interesting thing is that most of klezmer music uses modes rather than scales. And there's two major modes that are used. One is called Phrygish, which is, there's a Greek mode called Phrygian, and it's similar to that. The other is called the Ahava Rabbah, because apparently the notes are similar to much synagogue music, particularly European synagogue music, but particularly, I believe, to some version of Ahava Rabbah. Obviously, you have it in the daily liturgy. You have it also in other places. I think it may be from the melody that's used on the high holidays.
You can play anything like that? Start davening, I'll start praying.
Well,
That's
actually,
right.
the first tune, I believe the first
Before I
tune we
was
did
dancing,
was
isn't it?
actually in this Ahava Rabbah mode.
What about this Eufen Pripitzer?
Eufen
Say it
Pripitzer.
right.
Yes.
You gotta go
Help
get
me
some
out
Yiddish.
here. Help me
Yiddish.
out here.
Send her to Yiddish school.
Right, that's song is from the fireplace, and it's actually a very sad song. We often find that when we play it for older people whose Yiddish is better than yours or mine,
Okay.
that they often get kind of teary about it because it's all about learning the Aleph base and how these letters are really beautiful, but that it also tells a tragic story, tragic history.
Actually,
Well-
one of the lines is the history of the Jewish people is written in tears.
Wow. Well, we'll keep. This is good for the middle of the program, not ending the program with this then. Okay. Wow. Wow. I could see where everyone would tear up.
And just the melody itself is
Yeah.
really
Powerful.
Poignant.
Poignant. Yes.
poignant, I'd say.
Yeah. So, what would be your hope moving forward in terms of? Do you hope that there's a resurgence of klezmer music, or
Well, look
you
at
just,
the past. Has there
or do
been
you
already
just-
a revival?
or do you just hope that it doesn't die out like Yiddish is dying out, or do you hope that there'll be, more of appreciation of klezmer?
My hope would be, and you're starting to see this already, is people starting to take the klezmer music which already was evolving, The klezmer music that we know from the early recordings is probably very different than the klezmer music from 40, 50 years before.
Really?
Some of it's technological in terms of that as many Jews were drafted in the Tsar's army for many years, they learned to play brass instruments, they learned to play clarinet, and so went from, as David mentioned, from being a violin-based music to being a lot of wind instruments. Obviously, as we move into the 20th century, you have the increasing use of the accordion, and obviously over time, more modern instruments. And so the hope for me certainly is that it gets evolved to the point that you find people writing new klezmer music, building on the old stuff, but creating new music that is relevant, continues to be relevant. Certainly my feeling over time from when we started doing this was that I didn't want it to be in a museum. I wanted it to be something that was at Simchas, that was alive, that people would dance to, not just to put it in a museum and say, oh, this is what people used to listen to.
We want it to be fun.
Right.
I mean, actually, there's been a increasingly dynamic klezmer revival for probably 30 years, going back to the 80s, because
I'd say so.
There were bands like the Klezmorim out of San Francisco who were recording in the mid 80s. The Klezmer Conservatory Orchestra from
Well, we had
from
Boston.
New England.
we had Robin
New England
Seletsky on,
Conservatory.
who was part of a band, the Catskill Klezmarine, which I don't think exists anymore, but again, that's part of that revival. So.
And Rabbi and I were talking a little bit before about the Yiddish Book Center, and they actually have a klezmer festival every summer, something called Yidstock, which is a 3-day festival, and they have klezmer bands, not merely from all over the U.S., but all over the world. And in my travels, I have come across and looked for klezmer bands, and you can find there's an incredibly active klezmer music scene in Berlin. Not all Jewish musicians,
Right.
And in other European countries, there's even klezmer bands in China.
So where is Yitzstock? Is that roaming? Do they?
No,
all
they
perform at
hold it at the Yiddish Book Center, which is in Amherst.
Amherst, Massachusetts.
Wow, we gotta go. When do they do this? In the
Sometime
summer?
in July every
In
year.
July.
Yeah,
So close. We have to.
and they have a terrific lineup.
Okay. Wait, do you go every year or almost every year? Or?
I haven't gone yet. I've been looking at it.
Next year, 2015, it's a road trip.
It's the year.
It's the road trip
We'll
for
go
us.
together.
Okay, we're going.
But it is revived. That's the main thing, Dad. It's interesting. I mean, really, you can parallel the Yiddish with Judaism, because there was a lull in the 40s, 50s, and the youth didn't want to have anything to do with Judaism. And then really 60s, which was the time of Fiddler on the Roof and just growing on a chart.
Right.
Then just people are just more interested in their heritage. Of course, I appreciate people getting into the Torah and doing the mitzvahs, but the Yiddish culture is all part of Judaism and the music, the Jewish music, and it's interesting how much it had influenced other, modern people. They always, say how much of Bob Dylan. His father was a cantor. How much Jewish music, or there's actually now articles in Elvis Presley that how much Jewish music has influence. These are the most major people in the 20th century.
Al Jolson also.
Yeah, the real.
No, you laugh. It's true. I
Yeah.
mean, he was a cantor. His
He was
father
the
was a
real thing.
cantor. He was the real thing. Yes, but
I'm just saying it's interesting.
his
how
real
much-
name was Asa Yolson. I see here on the sheet here it says Russian Scher, Scher, and we
Yes.
have a gentleman who Mike Scher,
Right.
in the community, but there's nothing
Well,
related
there's-
to Mike Scher here, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting because obviously "shir" in Hebrew
It's a song.
is song. "Sher" in Yiddish is scissors, and this Russian, and so there was a "Sher" dance, which was it was kind of like a square dance. I actually do have a couple friends who actually know how to dance a "Sher." I don't really know, but it's basically it's a.
We're not going
square
to
dance
demonstrate
You're
here.
No, we're
not
not gonna
even going to
demonstrate.
try, no.
But we can play a little bit of it,
All right, good.
and you may recognize particularly the second part of it.
Okay.
Give me a good count. klezmer songs end the same way with the standard klezmer ending,
Right.
which is those 3 notes.
Dum,
And I've often,
dum.
I've often pictured that, you know, when the early recordings were being made on, they had the 3-minute, the 78s and the 3 minutes, even wax recorders before that. And my guess is that somebody looked up and said, oh, we're at 2 minutes, 50 seconds.
Bum,
Just
bum,
cut
bum.
it.
That's right. Kind of like we're out of time, and kind of like this show right now. Dum bum bum. So, no, thank you very much. It was-
Thank you.
It's really been fun to do this. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. This is
Rabbi,
great.
you got to give them a blessing.
Just a blessing that you should continue on with your good work, and it is part of Judaism. It's just expanding Jewish life for people. That's the way they connect. People connect with music many times. So keep on going, doing more, and do it with success and with good health. You have one last fast note over here?
Yeah, play us out.
Yeah.
Over the credits.
9:29.
Thank you.
We could do.
Okay.